Hey, what is going on, everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and here we're coming back with another PlayStation 2 type of video. Now, I do want to be clear about this, that this is not going to be for everyone, but this is one of the coolest, if not the coolest thing for the PlayStation 2 I have seen, and this is in the form of MechaPwn, a newly released piece of software for the PlayStation 2. Now, MechaPwn is brought to us by the Mecha research team, and all the links for this are going to be down below in the description as usual. However, MechaPwn itself can be found on its own GitHub repository page with a few contributors here, so big thank yous and shout outs go to Balika011, Matthew LH, as well as Myria-chan, who are the current contributors right now on this project. Now, there is an incredibly hardy README right here, and if anybody is wanting to look into this themselves, I would recommend taking a look at it here. I am going to be reading off several parts of this, however, it's not going to be covering every single detail, and it would be important if you are even attempting to set this up here. But even with that introduced, why would you want to run it on your PlayStation 2? Well, imagine a PlayStation 2 where you can have your region unlocked on the system. You'll be able to run PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games from any region. Yes, I do know that we have homebrew methods and capabilities of doing that, and you can even install a mod chip in your system and get that, but this is all without a mod chip. If you have the ability to boot into a piece of homebrew, whether it be free DVD boot, free Mic boot, OpenTuna, ForTuna, what have you, you will be able to run this. Although again, there are a few stipulations on that, which is why I say this is not going to be for everyone. I am going to cover that several times here, but that's also why you all might have noticed I'm not framing this as a tutorial, because this is certainly not something that everyone should cover, but it would be something that is absolutely worth checking out and just familiarizing yourself with. First of all, the biggest disclaimer here is to not use this on a real development system. This is for retail systems only. That means if you go and you get a standard retail PS2, imagine some that you would just buy from a normal game shop, not any piece of development hardware, that is what you want to run it on. You want to run it on retail hardware. This is not for development hardware at all. This is an incredibly powerful piece of software right here that can brick your PlayStation 2. Yes, it can actually do that because we are going to be modifying the PlayStation 2 itself. We're not going to load files off of a hard drive. We're not going to be loading files off a memory card. We're not installing a chip. This is actually modifying a chip on the PlayStation 2's motherboard. Now, we also need to cover which PlayStation 2s will work with this, because not all of them are going to be alike. First of all, if you have a fat PlayStation 2, the SCPH 50,000 models and higher are going to work with this. Anything lower than that is not going to work with this. Now, there's two ways to denote this. The first way you can check this out is, of course, if you look at the model number on the back of the console. However, if you also want to be sure from a glance, you could look at the front of the system, and next to the two USB ports, there is an iLink port. If you have an iLink port, your PlayStation 2 will not be able to use MechaPwn. If you do not have an iLink port, that means your PlayStation 2 fat model will be able to use MechaPwn. And finally, another way of checking this for certainty is if you have your PlayStation 2 fired up right here, you can press the triangle button, and if you look at console, you will be able to see what exact model you are running. So that will also help out as well too. So do keep in mind that only those newer fat models, the 50,000 series and higher, is going to work. And when it comes to these slim systems, all of these slim systems are going to be working for this. For my demonstration here, I'm going to be using my 90,001. That is the, of course, 90,000 model of the PlayStation 2 Slim, and 1 meaning that it is for the NTSC-U region and North American territory. Now, in order to get our homebrew actually running, we are going to be running this from a USB drive, but as our entry point, it would be best to have a memory card based method. and that is because that's really going to be the thing that will work here. That's at least what's been verified and tested, and I know, for example, I've made other videos that have shown, setting up free McBoot using free DVD boot, and one side effect of this is that free DVD boot is not going to be working. So first of all, if you are using free McBoot, you do have to have the multi-install of the latest 1.966 version installed. That's at least the latest at the time we are recording this. It's even covered right here at the bottom in the FAQ asking why did free McBoot stop working, and it does cover that 1.8 is not going to be supported here because of what this does, while as version 1.9 will be supported, but of course you have to have the multi-region multi-install version selected, which is what would be used here. On my own PlayStation 2 here, I will be using OpenTuna in order to launch this because this system that I am using is not compatible with free McBoot, but we are still able to have an entry point on our memory card. Now on top of that, as I talked about free DVD boot, that is an absolutely great entry point most of the time. However, the issue here is going to be if you do not have a memory card entry point installed that is going to be compatible with this once we install MechaPwn, you are not going to be able to use free DVD boot. It is explained in the FAQ right here how this works and how this breaks it, and it states to fix that you need to install a DVD player update to your memory card, which I'm not going to be covering on here, but that is why I am saying to have a entry point that is compatible on your memory card. The last thing I'll cover before we jump into this right now is in regards to PAL and NTSC-J consoles. As we are talking about this, I have mentioned that this will essentially region unlock our PlayStation 2. Now the last thing I want to cover before I fully jump into this is in regards to region unlocking, because if you have a SCPH 70,000 or earlier model and you have a Japanese or PAL PlayStation 2, it is not going to be region unlocked, unfortunately, so you will not be able to play NTSC-U or PAL games on that system. You can do that, however, with NTSC-U systems, which is what I have right here. Granted, I have a newer model, but that's just another stipulation to have on hand with how many different types of BIOS and models the PlayStation 2 has out there. Now, what we can do with this process here, essentially, is once we run MechaPwn, we can either change the console region or we can change it to a debug system, which will unlock the region for us, which will allow us to play, of course, games from any region, which will be great. So when I hit the triangle button, where it says my SCPH and my number right there, that is going to change once we have all of this set up. Now, for anybody who might be wondering here, hey, I have a mod chip, or why can't I just install a mod chip, or what have you? First of all, if you have a mod chip, I really would not recommend following this. It's actually even stated here again, my PS2 has a mod chip, will it work for me? And in short, this is stating that several mod chips might not fully disable even if you do disable them, such as the Modbo 4 might introduce issues, but the Modbo 5 might seem to work just fine when you disable it. But I do believe, in my opinion, if you have a mod chip installed in your PS2, you're already able to seamlessly accomplish what we're going to be doing here. So on your specific PS2, you really don't need to run this. However, for anyone who doesn't have a mod chip, this is where things get pretty fun. Now, I do want to jump into this, but right before I do that, I want to stress yet again, if you are going to be doing this yourself, I really do recommend reading through the README on here. It has a lot of really great information, and it is pretty short. It's just a few minutes of a read here, because you might decide this is something you don't want to do on your system, and that's certainly fine. This is really only going to be, in my opinion, for people who really know what they're doing and they know how to navigate this and how to get this all set up here and used in the end. But thankfully, Belika has made this incredibly simple to set up here. So because it's so simple, I kind of do want to put those warnings out. So with everything covered and that long introduction here, what are we going to need for MechaPwn? Well, first of all, we are going to need a compatible PlayStation 2, which I have covered. We're also going to need a USB drive that we're going to need to format to FAT or FAT32, and we're going to need an entry point on a memory card, as I have stated. For my own PlayStation 2, I'm going to be using OpenTuna, which I have covered in an episode of Mod Chat, and this is an open source version of Fortuna, so this is great. It's been working for me so far. Over at the MechaPwn page, you can go over to Releases, and download the ELF file available right here. It's going to be the latest release of whichever you're going to be downloading, and just going to be MechaPwn.elf. Once you have it somewhere easily accessible, we need to transfer this to our USB drive. So for this, if you have a USB drive plugged in, you can check the properties and check for the file system. For the PS2, it has to be either FAT or FAT32, and we're going to be working with very small files right here, so we really don't need that much. I'm just using an old 4GB USB drive. So for this, I'm just going to format, in case you have not done this already. Just back up any data you might care about, and then format this to either FAT or FAT32 as applicable. Quick format is fine, all the defaults are okay, and that should be formatted. There we go. So now with all that done, we can just copy and paste MechaPwn right into the USB flash drive. Check this here, there we go. And now at this point, we can eject our USB drive and take it over to our PS2. When you go over to your PS2, plug in your memory card, plug in your USB drive, and go ahead, turn on the system. Now that we're available here, we just need to run our entry point. So yet again, make sure you have a compatible memory card based entry point, because that's what we're going to be continuing on with. Since this is OpenTuna, I just need to go into the browser, into the memory card, exit out, and our goal here is to launch ulaunch or wlaunch elf, just so we can open up an elf file. Now with this open, we can press circle, go to mass, press circle, highlight MechaPwn.elf, and press circle. After a few seconds, it should boot up. And there we go. Now it has this really cool animation that I like here, where it's just covering all of the territories quite literally, but the instructions are incredibly simple. First of all, we need to press X to continue, and it's going to back up a nvm.bin file, and this file is very important. So here we have two options to install the exploit or exit. You can press circle to install the exploit, and here this is very important, you have to cut power to your PS2 completely. So that's going to be either, if you have a fat PS2, switching the power off from the back, like physically switching it off, or unplugging it from the power right now. Do not just hit the reset button, physically unplug it, make sure it is fully powered off, and plug it back in. For this, however, I'm going to unplug the PS2, and then I would suggest taking the USB drive over to your PC. When we go over to our USB drive, we're going to see there is a new file here called nvm.bin. Now, this is console specific, this is incredibly important, and you need this file on hand. Again, this is specific to your system, and this is in case anything gets messed up or if you ever want to undo this. So I would recommend take this, make a backup of it, put it somewhere else. So I'm going to copy this and paste it onto my desktop, because you still want it on your USB drive right there, but you do not want to mix and match between consoles. So one nvm.bin per console, and it is specific. So even at that point, you can even rename it like nvm, and you can put like scph 90001, just something to denote it if you want to put the model number, the serial number, or what have you, and make sure that file is somewhere safe. I cannot stress that enough. So now that we have that all done, we can come back here, eject our USB drive, and take it back over to the PS2. Great, so we're at the PS2 again. Now I'm just going to do the exact same thing as before. If you're familiar with OpenTuna, FunTuna, ForTuna, any of those tunas, you are going to be familiar with this process here to get in. Now after a bit, we have our ulaunch elf. I'll press circle, go back over to mass, and we're going to run MechaPwn yet again. Now it's going to be a little different this time around here. So we can press X to continue on this, and now this is where we get to have our fun. We can find the change region option, which there's only two options right now, so we can press X on change region, and we have either CEX Retail or Retail-DEX. Now, it is not really recommended to just do CEX Retail. I am going to show you the options here, but I'm not going to be doing this. So if we go into this option, for example, what we need to do is we need to select our specific model of PlayStation 2. I know mine is a 90,000 series. Press X on there, and from here, you can actually change the region of it itself. So really that number at the very end, mine is a USA console. You can change it to any of these others that are available. So for example, if I wanted to change mine to a Japanese console, I could do that, and then it would operate exactly like a Japanese console. Now again, it's not really suggested to do a specific region change like that unless you really know what you're doing and you're absolutely sure of that here, but I'm not going to be doing that, so I'm going to exit out of this. Now we have to go through this process again if we exit out, but we have to make sure we have the exact version of this console on hand before we make any changes. If you haven't already done so, I would suggest when you boot up the system, press the triangle button and make sure you note down which specific console that you have. Since I know I have a 90,001, I am good at that point. So we're just going to make sure we can run this yet again here. Now, the option that most people would be interested in is going to be Retail-DEX. Again, this is going to convert our system to a debug system, and once it is debug, it should not honor region restrictions on here. Of course, there are the stipulations where if you have a 70,000 series or lower and it is PAL or NTSC-J, you won't be able to do that, but mind you, on my system, I know this will work. So I'm going to hit Retail-DEX. Now again, you need to pick your specific model. Now these all look quite different. That's why it's important to know the exact number that you have. Since I know I have a 90,000 series, I'm going to be selecting the last option, press X, and I know I have a 90,001. So I'm going to press X on this, and we're going to have an option here for force unlock. I am going to revisit this later in the video, so for this we're not going to do force unlock. It's going to restore patches, and now we have to unplug our system again, plug it back in, and turn it on. Well, here we go. Our PS2 looks the exact same as before, but if I hit the triangle button, check this out. The console is completely different. It is still a 90,001, but it is a DTL-H as opposed to a SCPH model, which is exactly what we are looking for. So now this is where the fun begins. I do have some games that I'm going to be testing here. Now again, you all saw this is a NTSC-U PlayStation 2, so normally this is not going to be able to play out-of-region games. However, I do have a few out-of-region games that we'll be able to try out. First of all, I do have a Japanese copy of Nights into Dreams. I just popped it into the PlayStation 2. This is an official game right here, and if we come over, it is recognized as a PlayStation 2 disc. So let's go ahead and fire this up. It seems to boot up like normal. No issue so far. And here we go. We seem to be all good at this point, so I will just have to end. There we go. But as you can see, the game is starting up. It is booting just fine, and there was no issues right there. We didn't have to do any swap tricks. We didn't have to do anything with a mod chip, nothing of the sort. This is just working as is on here. Like, this is great so far. This is what we were aiming for with our system. Of course, we could have had the same kind of functionality if I converted this to a retail Japanese unit, but why just limit ourselves to one region when we can have all of the regions? I do also have an imported copy, a PAL imported version of Underworld. Again, this is a officially pressed game and everything. So we are going to be trying this out because we've already tried a NTSC-J game, so let's try out a PAL game. So I'm just popping that into the PlayStation 2, going to go to the browser yet again, and you don't even have to go to the browser, I'm just showing you all so you can see the format of the disc. It is a PlayStation 2 disc, gold backed of course, and let's fire this up. Alright, so that's a little bit odd. It looks like my boot up is corrupted there. Just for full disclosure on this, I actually am running this with a chipped system, but I am disabling the chip and I know that that is not interfering on here. However, that is important to note. As you can see, the input end up changing to PAL, which would make sense because I am running this through RGB SCART on my adapter, and this is a PAL game, so it had to switch from NTSC to PAL on here. But as you can see right here, this game seems to be booting up just fine as well too. Maybe the only oddity that happened was the PlayStation 2 boot up being changed up there a little bit, just kind of showing as corrupted or just showing different in a way. But as you can see, this game is booting up and seems to be working just fine. You know, I have a feeling this game is probably not all that great, but At the same time, I kind of just picked it up because it was a few dollars at a thrift store, and I really never see PAL games in the area, so I said, why not? Let's add it to the collection. Now, the cool thing is, this does the same thing for original PlayStation games. So for the PS1, I have grabbed my Japanese imported copy of Persona 2 Innocent Sin. I'm just going to pop it into the PlayStation 2, and yet again, I'll go over to the browser just to show you all the media that's going to show up. And if I come over here, it's showing up as a PlayStation disc. Now let's go ahead and fire this up, and I'm going to show you all something important alongside this as well too. As you can see, it shows as Sony Computer Entertainment Incorporated. That's as opposed to SCEE or SCEA. It's showing as SCEI when booting up, so it seems to be reading that properly. No issues, nothing odd going on there. But aside from that, again, I do have a NTSC-U PlayStation 2 here that is now running a NTSC-J import effortlessly. I mean, this is great. It's booting up, it's running beautifully so far, it's all on the disk, just one-shot boot, nothing special on here. And that is the important part on this. Once you have this installed, you don't need to worry about having a file installed on a USB drive or a memory card or doing a swap trick or anything. All of that works right here, which is really awesome to see. Now, for anybody who's seeing this and they're really excited over being able to play physical imported games, just one-shot boot, ready to go without the need for a mod chip, well, guess what? It gets even better. You see, if we do not have Force Unlock for the PlayStation, there is another feature on here as well too, in which there are, of course, original PlayStation imports that can run, but backup discs work as well too. Now, I am going to show you all a backup copy I made of Persona 2 Innocent Sin, and some people might be wondering and just asking, well, you could just use the same game, how do we know that that's not going to work? Well, how about this? I'll just show you as opposed to telling, because it's going to be extremely obvious it's not going to be the same game, even though it is the same game. So just like before, I'm going to close up the PlayStation 2. We're going to go to our browser here. And as you can see, it's recognizing as a PlayStation disc. Now let's go ahead and fire this up. It's good that it's recognizing, we didn't get the error. It's bringing up SCEI for this when it's launching, and we can just wait a few moments. Now check this out. This is not the traditional Persona 2 Innocent Sin, this is a English patched copy, which I went over in a previous video a while ago, but this is just, you can take your own imported copy of Persona 2 Innocent Sin, back it up in ISO format on your computer, download the English patch, then you can apply the patch to that ISO and burn it off or run an emulator however you're going to do it. In this case, I did burn this off onto a disk so I can show you all right here. And as you can see, I mean, there's subtitles on the FMV and everything. This is the English patched version and it's running on a CDR. This is awesome. This is really cool. Again, you can do this without the need of a mod chip at this point. Now, I could show you all a NTSC-U copy of a game working. I do have a copy of Hunter the Reckoning Wayward right here. It's a little bit beat up, but it will do the job. But that's a little bit too boring. How about we try running a backup of it? So what I'm going to do is, this has not been patched with ESR, nothing special. This is just a backup I made and burned of a game that I have here. So I've popped it into the PS2. I'm going to go to my browser, and look at this, we end up getting a red screen. So unfortunately, it looks like backup PS2 games are not going to work. Or maybe that's not the case. Maybe that's not the case here. Let's just go ahead and get out of this screen here, because you remember when I was talking about Force Unlock earlier? We're about to revisit that. So this is going to be for PlayStation 2 games specifically, and it's even going to be so specific that once we apply Force Unlock, it's going to read every disc as a PlayStation 2 game. So that does mean you're going to end up breaking DVD playback, and you're also going to break PlayStation 1 playback, because you're not going to be able to play those games from a disc with Force Unlock enabled. But what we can do for this is go to our file browser, go to Mass, go to MechaPwn, and have this launch. Now you might notice after you make the change, you're always going to be prompted to make a new backup. I'm not going to be doing this here because I don't want to make a backup of this modified state. I want to keep my backup of my original state so I can always revert back to it. So for this here, I do have the backup that I made on my computer. It's backed up, it's safe. I have it on my USB drive, and I'm going to choose to keep my current backup. So we do have to reinstall the exploit here, in which we press circle, and we have to unplug and plug our system back in. So we have the PlayStation 2 booted back up. At this point, it is still in that technically modified state, but we had to reinstall MechaPwn, and that is important to note. Every time you end up changing the state of your console, just changing up the region on there, you have to reinstall MechaPwn itself. So once we go in here, we can go to Mass, MechaPwn, and we shouldn't have to install it again, at least right now, but we're just going to go through this process where we press X. I'm going to go to Change Region, Retail-DEX. I'm going to select the 90,000 model because that's what I have. And I'm going to go with USA. Now this time I am going to force unlock. So I'm going to press X, it's applied it, and at this point yet again, we can unplug and plug the PS2. So awesome, at this point here, we can go into the browser. I'm going to pop in my backup copy here of Hunter the Reckoning Wayward, and it should show up, right? Right? No, it doesn't. It brings us to this red screen. So there is a specific way we have to boot up our PS2 backups. It does require us to enable force unlock. That's why I had to do it here, but we have to go about it a different way. So for this, I'm just going to eject this here. And we need to, this time around, actually launch U-Launch-Elf or W-Launch-Elf. So we can go through the exact same process as before, wait a few seconds. And this time around, this is how we can boot up a PS2 backup, specifically PS2 backups. From here, we can pop the disk in. As you can see, it is detecting the disk as a DVD single layer, which is exactly what this has been burned to. Now from here, we can go to Circle for File Browser, and you need to go down to this Miscellaneous menu. Press Circle, and then you go into PS2 Disk. Press Circle here. It's going to start spinning up our disk. And if we wait a few seconds, I do hear it, there we go. We now have a backup of Hunter the Reckoning Wayward actually working on here. Now, it's not going to be as seamless as having that one-shot boot process. However, this is still incredibly awesome to see, but we do have to do that process there in which we have to have an entry point for our homebrew. So you need to use, of course, something like OpenTuna, or you have to use FreeMcBoot to boot into U-Launch-Elf or W-Launch-Elf and then launch it from there. But you do have to have force unlock enabled. However, this is going to work positively and negatively. It's going to read every disk as a PS2 disk. On the flip side though, it's going to read every disk as a PS2 disk. Let me just explain here. It's funny, I was actually going to show you all, and I swear this was breaking specifically before, that if I put in a PS1 game, it was not going to recognize properly. But it actually shows up as a PlayStation disc and it is booting up here, so I'm not sure what's going on with that because I do indeed have force unlock enabled on here, which is supposed to break this. It even states in the FAQ right here, force unlock is a very much needed feature for homebrew applications like Neo Geo emulation, PS2 Linux for reading CD and DVD ROM disks. What it's meant to do is unlock the disk drive for access. However, there is of course an important note that if you enable force unlock, every CD and DVD will be detected as a PS2 disc, meaning it breaks PS1 games and DVD video, which is what I had mentioned before. So really, because it's on the README here, I am still going to err on the side of caution from the developers. I am getting some unexpected behavior on this, which is certainly funny, but do keep in mind that this is not what's noted on the README. Typically, once you enable force unlock, only PS2 games are going to be working, so I would recommend just thinking that way there, just to be safe. So now for our final piece here, let's say we want to revert our console back to a stock state. Well, this is why it's very important to have that nvm.bin file available. So right here, I'm going to go to the browser, and what I'm going to do is just go through the process of launching MechaPwn last couple times. I was going to say one more time, but that's a lie. We do have to do this twice. So again, make sure you have your console specific nvm.bin sitting on the flash drive like I do right there. Go ahead, launch MechaPwn, and once this comes up, we can continue. We're going to keep the current backup. We need to reinstall MechaPwn, and we need to completely unplug and replug our system. Now, yet again, once we have this all set up and ready to go, we need to go into the memory card. At least I'm going to be doing this here. We're going to launch ulaunch-elf. Now, yet again, I've just cut forward and launched ulaunch-elf. We're going to launch MechaPwn a second time here. We should not have to install anything because we have done this before. But at this point, I'm going to restore my NVM backup. It's now been restored from my USB drive. And at this point, I can unplug and plug it back into power one more time. So right here, I have restarted the PS2, and as you can see, we are in normal, boring retail land. But just to test this out, I'm going to put in my Japanese copy of Nights into Dreams one more time. I'll be going over to the browser, and oh, it didn't even display it there. Look at that. We got the red screen of death there, which means that we are not able to launch this game successfully. So that is exactly where we're at now. We're back at our stock state. And even just to verify another sad reality here, I am going to pop in my imported copy of Persona 2 Innocent Sin, the original pressed disc, and it's going to read, and as you can see shortly here, yep, as opposed to bringing up the disc itself, it brings us to this red screen of death. So yet again, we do not have our modified system anymore. MechaPwn has been completely uninstalled from this. Anyways, that is about it for this video. This has been, without a doubt, one of the coolest things that I have seen for the PlayStation 2. And in my opinion, probably the biggest thing that we have seen. It's really crazy because this is just off of the heels with last year's release of free DVD boot, which really brought the PlayStation 2 to Dreamcast levels of territory in which you were able to patch discs, with either games or homebrew or what have you, with this free DVD boot payload, which would then perform a buffer overflow exploit on the DVD player and have your homebrew up and running that way. That was incredibly cool, very much like the Dreamcast with the mill CD exploit. However, this here is bringing most, if not all, of the capabilities people are looking for with a PlayStation 2 mod chip without the need of a PlayStation 2 mod chip. Really, all you need at this point is a USB drive and your memory card, and you're good. This is just absolutely incredible. I do again want to give a huge shout out and thank you to the Mecha research team, as well as the contributors who have been on here so far with Balika011, Matthew LH, as well as Myria Chan, for all of their awesome efforts on here. It's also noted you can ask Balika011 questions on Twitter if you have any. He has linked his Twitter there, so I would recommend giving him a follow. Maybe not even if you just want to ask questions, just, supporting him that way is absolutely awesome to see. But that is about it for this video, and perhaps even Endgame for the PlayStation 2 at this point. I didn't think it could get much better than free DVD boot, but look where we're at right now. This is super cool. Anyways, that is about it for this video. This is Mr. Mario signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, a like would absolutely be appreciated. And if you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well too.